Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Banter. My name is Tucker Hazel. Today, I'm joined by my golden-haired scumbag co-host, Tanner Dykstra. Today, we're here to talk about The Apprentice, a film that has had a very weird rollout, but now it is here, and we have seen it. There's a film about 45th president of the United States. Former president, but this is before that. Donald J. Trump. This is his origin story. This is Trump Origins Wolverine. And today we're here to talk about our thoughts on that movie. Leave your comments about your thoughts on this movie or join our Discord to talk to us about it. Tanner, we've seen The Apprentice.
Yes.
I'd say you were looking forward to this movie. How do you feel about it?
I was looking forward to it. I mean, I was just purely based on a gross interest factor,
sure.
or is this film actually going to come out? I mean, we won't talk too much about that. You can look into that yourself. But the film itself, as it exists, The Apprentice, 2024, directed by Ali Abbasi.
Yes.
My main thought, and this statement just kept running through my mind after I saw it. I remain unconvinced that you can make a compelling movie about Donald Trump.
Okay.
And we'll get into all of that, but I don't know. The film overall just felt a little bit hamstrung for me by nature of what is there to say about this guy anymore that isn't maybe readily understood, or it has the complexity to fill up a 2-hour film. I don't know if this film convinced me that story can be told or is told within this film. But there are elements of it I enjoyed. The performances are interesting. I think we have some talented people here. I think the look of it is especially something that I really enjoyed, and one of the sort of leaps and bounds that's taken creatively that I liked. And the overall point is cogent after all, if not a little bit on the nose, hammered home a little bit too close.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a good movie.
Yeah.
I think it is well made. I think everyone in it delivers their lines well. I think the production design is there. The cinematography is very interesting. I certainly get into that. But for me, my main feeling going through is this scene is good. They they're delivering this well. I look at that cool set that they have in the background. But it kept feeling like it was hitting me on the head with Trump things in the way of Trumpisms in the way of things that, as a current modern audience living through the reign, as we'll say, of Donald Trump.
Yes, he certainly has.
There's a lot of bits that we all know about Trump that people our age make a lot of jokes about, and this movie is certainly in on those. But it's in on those things that wouldn't come to fruition for another 25 years after this movie is set, if that. And it ends up feeling like its own meta-textual narrative about Donald Trump that consistently took me out of the world of these characters, obviously based on real life people, but it felt like it wasn't trying to do a realistic story. It is a biopic, but it feels like a commentary biopic in the way of watching a scene play out, and then instead of having it feel like there's a normal conversation or a genuine character interaction that was ending a scene, we would end it on basically, as I compared to it in the theater with you, the Solo A Star Wars Story moments of, this is where
he got this.
Yes.
This is why he says or believes this.
His Fuzzy Dice or Han Solo last name moments of why he doesn't admit that he lost the election. Yeah. Why he says certain things, or why he treats people certain ways. Okay, guys. I mean, maybe, but probably not. And that's how I just felt through so many scenes of this movie. It's are we really letting the point of this scene be taken away by something he might not have said? He probably wouldn't say for another 30 years that is only relevant in the 2010s, but you're retroactively inserting it back into his origin story.
So a lot of this, and I'll just mention this up top. A lot of my read of this film is going to be informed by, and the factual historical basis of it is going to be informed by a 2 or maybe 3-part podcast that I listened to from the Dollop. On Donald Trump, where they basically did the same thing. They basically started his life when he was a child, which is before this film obviously picks up, and then goes through the 2000s, 2010s, whatever. And there is an element of yes, he he is an unchanging person in a lot of ways. He always believes the stuff that he believes. He does not change his mind. He does not really change his behaviors, whether it be in 1975 or 2025 or whatever. He kind of like always behaved that way from what I'm led to believe.
Well, I mean, I don't think that's what this film is presenting, though.
So the film picks up with, Donald Trump is sort of he's like unmolded clay is kind of what this film posits, is that he's like nothing. Mm-hmm. He's going door to door collecting rent at his father's buildings. Yeah. He begins a friendship with...
It's really an underdog story.
That's right. With Roy Cohn, who is this infamous lawyer who really fills him in and makes him Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. He gives him the 3 rules, which is attack, 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 never admit defeat, and deny everything. Yeah, there's something like that. Yeah. And like once he hits those 3, and then like maybe 15, 20 minutes more of movie pass, you're like, okay, Donald Trump is fully formed. There's still an hour left of this movie where I don't feel like he's going to change it, where he does not change at all.
No, yeah. It's interesting to watch a movie where you do see the character change over the course of this film, as he's kind of a more reserved guy at the beginning, and he has internal self-confidence, but it's so like beaten down by the presence of his father and unsure of necessarily how to handle things, that he kind of like begs and pleads his way into this role as an apprentice. And I think that's the most interesting part of this movie. It is a Trump story, but it's really about the dynamic between Trump and Roy Cohn, and how, I don't know. Honestly, I listened to that podcast. I haven't read any books about him. I honestly don't know that much about the early life of Donald Trump, and I'm not old enough to remember him sort of coming to prominence.
You're not like 60 years old?
Not quite. Not yet.
Okay.
And so I'm watching this stuff, and I'm like, I'm going to believe that this is true, but as someone who is kind of watching this movie this is my understanding now of like how Donald Trump was as a younger person, and how he like evolved into the man that has dominated the 21st century. That balance between me not having a ton of knowledge and not knowing what's true or not, versus what I was mentioning earlier, where this film doesn't really play it straight as its own internal logic, because I feel like it's trying to do so much modern Trump things in an older context. It felt like it was like at odds with itself for me. I was like, I'm trying to learn about this, but I also like the people making this know all the stuff I'm trying to learn, and so there's like not really. I mean, I was just confused for a lot of this movie.
So this is my point of like why I remain unconvinced that you can make a compelling narrative about Donald Trump, because as I understand, and the Trump campaign would certainly would deny this, but like a lot of the events of this film are factually accurate. Sure. A lot of this stuff actually happened. This is corroborated, by both Abbasi's film and then the podcast series that I listened to, which is very well researched.
Yeah.
So like it's not like they're making things up, but what they are doing, this is to your point, Tucker, they are really focusing on things that's like, okay, this is an element, this is a starting point of like who we know Donald Trump to be now.
Exactly.
And I'm like, you cannot be so obsessed with like the man as he exists today, I don't think.
Yeah.
Like that is the reason you're making the movie is because he became who he became. He became president of the United States and completely restructured the order of business for American politics and all of this stuff. But there is more to him, or maybe there isn't. I don't know.
Yeah,
never met him. Because he is frankly.
I didn't know he was sick.
Good point. Because he is so like. He's so ego driven that he is all ego to a certain point. You're like, is there anything deeper past this guy's surface, past the words that he says, that is more interesting or compelling or humanistic about him? I remain unconvinced by anything in this film that is the case.
No, I agree with that. I think that there, in reality, is, but I don't think this movie does that. I think it tries to, and I think that watching him go from a guy who is sort of unsure of himself and does need guidance to there's really, I mean, I can't remember the exact moment, but there is kind of a moment where like I feel like the writing and then also Sebastian Stan, who haven't even said his name, but Sebastian Stan's performance as Donald Trump, there's like a switch that turns on.
Yes,
like
there's a
like
time
halfway
jump.
through the movie.
Yeah.
There's a time jump, and we're like, okay, now he feels like Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting.
It's right. I think it's the moment. A lot of this is like the film is about Donald Trump's rise to prominence within like the real estate industry
Yes.
in New York City.
Yeah.
And but like Atlantic City in New Jersey or whatever. And there's the jump from basically getting this blackmail done to construct his first major hotel. There's a time jump after that where he's like, okay, he did the thing. He's Donald Trump now. Roy Cohn is on the sidelines. He is like, oh no, the monster that I have created. And that is the mode we operate for the rest of the film.
Yeah.
It just operates in two halves like that.
Yeah, and that was certainly interesting, but I feel like there is a texture missing there where I almost feel like we missed the most interesting part of his full completed evolution into like the character Donald Trump, because Sebastian Stan's performance makes I think significant leap, not in that he was bad in either half of the movie, but there's a big change there, and you can see the seeds being planted of the way that Roy Cohn is teaching him to act in certain scenarios, and he's sort of like sitting there taking mental notes on things, and so you can see the way that he would convert into that. But honestly, first half of this movie, Trump is like, he's just kind of a guy.
He's just like a weedy guy who's not very confident in anything that he's doing. And then we do that time jump. It's the 80s now, I think, if the timeline lines up. Like we transition into the 1980s, and he is doing you listen to me. We're gonna be the most tremendous hotel. You're not gonna believe this guy's a liar. He's a schmuck. He's a loser. Like he's just turned the switch on to be the Donald Trump mannerisms now.
Exactly. Yeah, and I don't really know how you would show that change more. You just have to show that change more gradually, I guess, for me to believe that transformation in a more humanistic way. It's like, you see how a guy picks up these traits, but we don't really see him start those traits until the traits are there, which is really, really fascinating. But this movie is about Donald Trump's life, but again, it's more actually about the dynamic between him and Roy Cohn, and then also how that sort of links with the AIDS epidemic of the time, and that's an element of this movie that I did not realize was going to be as prominent of a feature of the story as it is. And also I didn't really realize that it was mostly about. I mean, for the first half of the movie, it feels like it's mostly about Roy Cohn, which is really, really interesting.
Yeah, because I think obviously Abbasi recognizes that, like, okay, we need to tell audiences who Roy Cohn is. He died in probably like the early 90s, I would presume, and like,
Can look it up.
Yeah, but go ahead and look that up. And like, obviously people aren't going to be familiar with him as they are Donald Trump. So we need to sort of inform you, and that works with Trump being unfamiliar with him in the early parts of this movie, of like who he is. And like, he and Jeremy Strong's performance is such a like larger than life, borderline cartoonishly evil characterization that like you're like, oh, and from that standpoint, 86, okay. And from that standpoint, it makes sense where Trump picked up all these things from. This film is positing that like that is what happened.
Definitely.
In reality, from the podcast, the series anyway, it's probably more Roy Cohn and Fred Trump. But
sure.
His father takes like a real backseat for this movie.
Definitely. And that's again, that's the takeaway of this movie for me, is that like, the Anakin had a Palpatine.
Yeah, exactly. That is really what the movie is about. Is that like, I mean, from down to like in this film likes to dangle the political carrot in front of Trump's character a lot. I mean, like, because he became president. You remember that? I was like, yes, I remember that actually.
Yeah, I was there.
I was there. But anyway, from down to like, he's always harping on, you gotta love America. America first. Democracy. Do anything you can to protect democracy.
Yeah.
You know, anybody.
It's okay to bend the rules a little bit.
Yeah. Anyone, you gotta fucking tear down anyone who's betraying America. Stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Where do you want to go? Should we talk about like Stan and Strong's performances here? So Sebastian Stan is given a hefty task here in trying to like embody Trump in a non-comedic fashion, which is not something that's really been done in popular culture. Everyone has a Trump impression. Everyone has seen a billion Trump parodies.
Yeah.
But he is not trying to do that.
No, definitely not.
And I think he does a solid job.
Yeah. I think he does as good as he can.
I think so too. And ultimately, I think it is just a matter of the kind of movie, the shortcomings of the movie that we've already highlighted.
Yeah.
I was like, it feels like he can't get especially deep into the character because the characters, we're not super concerned with, like, investigating him necessarily.
Definitely. Well, I mean, I agree, but I will, because the movie narratively to me felt more about the dynamic and less about the humanist side of Trump. And so you're right. Like, writing wise, he's what he's given is not like really fleshing out Trump
it's not like a character study necessarily.
No.
We are watching him become that, and we've already discussed our issues with him like becoming Donald Trump. Jeremy Strong, let's talk about him.
Yeah.
Roy Cohn. I think the physical performance is very good. I think that it's not super compelling stuff that's written for him.
Okay. You mean like, I guess his arc?
The arc, it's really like he is evil, and then Donald Trump becomes more evil than him, and he's oh God, what have I done?
Yeah, he's like, oh, suddenly, because someone else is more evil, he almost, I can't tell if he feels bad about what he did, or just that he's feels like he's lost power.
Exactly.
And that's an interesting idea, but it does present, again, kind of an on-off switch sort of thing.
Yeah.
Because he disappears for, I don't know, like a middle third of this movie.
Exactly.
And then it isn't until the end when he resurfaces and he's completely changed that you're even aware there's going to be an arc for him. Because he is such a cartoonish presence that I do think, again, it's a writing thing. It's not a performance thing.
Yeah.
Jeremy Strong and Sebastian Stan are doing absolutely the best what they're given. And Jeremy Strong is delivering these lines, and he's like half stumbling through things, but he's got this sort of charismatic presence where his shoulders are always forward a little bit, and he's like telling people off and like telling people what to do.
The deadpan kind of look that he always has is like really good, which is why I say the physical side of the performance is super good. And he's always doing, I don't know if you caught this, he's always like knocking his head forward as he's talking,
like a turkey.
He's like, and so listen to me, Donald. You got to do this thing, and the city hall is going to be on our ass about this thing.
Yeah.
And like he does not let that up. So I'm like, obviously that is a mannerism that Strong picked up on during his research of this, and he doesn't drop it for a second.
Yeah.
And again, the look, like I mentioned, and when he comes back and he has HIV/AIDS and he is completely weakened.
Well, no, it's liver cancer.
Sorry, yes. When he has liver cancer, and he comes back and he is completely weakened and depleted, but still trying to put on these airs a little bit. He's very good in those moments too. I think we've already said it's kind of the script that fails him.
Yeah.
The last big performance of the film that we should talk about is Maria Bakalova as Ivana Trump, who pops in, and Trump is like, I want to marry her, and then he follows her around for a little bit. And then they do get married.
Yes.
I feel like this is an element of the film that if we really wanted to dig into like who Trump is outside of like who we already know who he is and his mannerisms, his Trumpisms, whatever, this is the part of the film that you zero in on.
Totally.
And we just really don't. What do you think?
No, I agree. Again, I keep reiterating, this movie is about the Roy Cohn Donald Trump dynamic and the evolution. It is not as much about who he is internally, which I do think the only moments of that characterization that really work for me are the moments he shares with Ivana. It's when their relationship is on the rocks. It's when he's crying in bed after his brother has died. It's the moments when he's trying to woo Ivana, who's interacting with in a way that we haven't seen him interact with anyone else, because everyone else is in like real estate or positions of power or whatever. She is a very different force in this movie, and I think I didn't really feel any chemistry between the two of them.
Fair.
So I didn't really feel like I was watching any kind of like real romance. I mean, I don't know the reality of that. I don't know the reality of that.
Yeah, but like, is that? I think that's the point. Is that their relationship is, especially for Trump's mind, entirely transactional.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah, and that's a little bit ham-fisted.
Yes, I mean there's an entire sequence where they're like going over the prenup and everything like that, and based on a true story, he did give her like $100,000 before he married her, and like I mean all of this stuff. I mean down to the rape scene that is in this film where he rapes Ivana. Like that is a real thing that happened, and after when we flip that switch when we go into the 80s, that kind of thing. And there's that first scene where he's like getting out of the limo and she hesitates and then she gets out. That is like the last moment you get of like Ivana Trump.
Yeah.
And then it's like off to the races with Sebastian Stan doing the impersonation kind of thing. We mentioned the look of it up top. We should totally talk about this before we end. It's really interesting. It's probably like the most interesting thing about the movie. I think, for me,
absolutely.
Is that it can ebb and flow, but once we hit that like halfway point, we really fully hit we're doing like VHS lines, kind of like the VHS tape kind of look to the entire film.
Well, not to the entire film, and
True,
this is where
thank you.
Well, as you mentioned, that really starts to come in around the halfway point, which is interesting because
I guess the rest of it is just like a film look, which I guess also periodically accurate.
Yeah, it's a stylistic choice. I do think that it looks good, and I like the color grading a lot. And I think the set design and costume design, everything is really great. But I think that it is the most interesting part of this movie stylistically is when they choose to use handheld cameras, when they choose to either probably filter the footage that they got to make it look like it's shot on.
I don't think they probably didn't film on a VHS camera.
on either VHS camcorders or like television film cameras. But my problem with the switching the styles in terms of is it handheld, what's the quality of the film, what's the film stock that they're shooting on, is I can't tell when they're using specific film stocks, when they're using for specific types of cameras, because a type of camera is always changing, and there are moments where it feels almost like The Office, where it's like we're like handheld camera, like watching from afar, and I'm like, well, why this shot? Why this scene? And then it'll cut to, and it'll just be like a normal film grain look, and it's like, okay, well, why is that shot have that? And then sometimes it'll be like a VHS camera. It's like, well, because the style doesn't seem to match the tone or the situation. Usually when you're switching to handheld and shaky cam, it's because, well, not that there's like shaky cam in this movie, like I don't know, fucking.
Well, there's like crash zooms and stuff.
Yeah, but the style of the camera work to me didn't ever really match what was happening on screen. So I'm like, it's cool that they're mixing this up, but I don't know what this film stock or this camera movement or whatever is supposed to mean in relation to what's happening with our characters.
I mean, I totally agree. I would say that I didn't pick up on any of that either. Like, I've seen Abbasi's previous film, Holy Spider, and I didn't feel a whole lot of, like, directorial auteurist cohesion or, like, carryover between these two films. They feel like completely different directors made the two, honestly. So I don't really know what that speaks to. I just wanted to point that out. That it's like, Holy Spider, the only other film of his that I've seen, is not like that. It's not like this in many ways. I mean, there was also a report...
No one's talking about Trump.
That's true. There was a report that like Paul Thomas Anderson and Clint Eastwood were both approached to direct this film and turned it down. So I don't know. Maybe I don't really know what that points to. But like I don't know. Maybe they were looking for like a more assured hand directing this kind of thing. Or Clint Eastwood and Paul Thomas Anderson have both done like biopic or biopic adjacent historical sort of things before. Ali Abbasi, not to my knowledge, has not necessarily done that kind of thing before. Anyway, Tucker, is there anything else we want to talk about here?
I don't think so.
What would you give The Apprentice out of 10?
I at the end of the day, I think it is a good movie.
I think so too.
And it did give me extra information about this guy that is so prominent in our culture. And I think everyone's giving a good performance. I think the movie looks good, and I like that there are these stylistic changes and stylistic choices. What I mean, but at the end of the day, the writing of the movie felt like it was barreling forward, and it was. And if it wasn't barreling forward, it was trying to tie back in this sort of meta narrative that kept taking me out of the world. And so I don't really feel like I honestly don't feel like I learned too much watching this movie. Yeah. It's like it is good, and I can't knock it too much, but I also don't think that this is. I think we will but before we die, there will be a better Trump biopic.
Yeah, probably, or maybe not. Maybe this is we've hit it already.
Yeah.
Who's to say? Like I said, I kind of remain unconvinced that you can make a compelling movie about this guy.
Yeah.
Anyway, Tucker, I'm gonna get. Did you give a score?
6.2 out of 10.
6.5 out of 10.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for watching our review of The Apprentice. Stick around for more movie reviews. And let us know what you thought of this movie. I'm doing my Trump. Let us know what you thought about this movie.
It's a tremendous film, or no, he would say, it's a political hit piece. They're out to get me. Kamala Harris put this out to destroy the Trump campaign.